Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Haas from nichepursuits.com. And you wouldn't believe it, but I've got my co-host with me, Perrin, here. We're ready to do another podcast. Perrin, how you doing? And I have to ask, what's new in your life?
We haven't had many podcasts in the last 2 weeks or so, and that's mostly been because we usually like to co-host them. And I was off getting married, so now I have joined the ranks of whatever club that is. So
yeah, I joined the married club. Congrats, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel awesome. You know, because like we got married and you're planning that for a bunch of months, and it's super stressful, and then it's a big party, and then it's over, and then we were just had a house on the beach for a week, and I just basically read novels and tried super hard not to work. So, I mean, I think I sent you 2 emails, and by the second email, you were like, all right, enjoy your week off.
Yep. No, I'm sure it's great to have a nice vacation. But yeah, congrats on getting married. For people listening, I'm sure parents still accepting wedding gifts. If you want to, shoot them something nice, shoot them an email at least. So say congrats.
Yeah, I'll take links for my gifts.
That's right. Give them some nice juicy backlinks or something, right? So, no, very good. So, but we're ready to get back into it. Parents started working again this week. I'm ready to finally record another podcast. I was being a little lazy as well, but I think we have a really good one. And in fact, it's not just one podcast. Today is going to be the start of a 5-part series. I've decided that it's finally time to do 2 things. One, tell the story of Longtail Pro. Longtail Pro has been an integral part of my business. It's been very, very successful. So I want to share a little bit more of that background than I have in the past. But secondly, I want to make this very applicable. In this 5-part series, I want to share with you, the listener, how you can go out and start your own successful software business. When I started Longtail Pro, it was very much a bootstrapped business. I did it with my own money. I didn't go into debt, all those sorts of things. I started very small and have grown it. And so I feel like there's a lot of lessons that I can share that I haven't shared previously here on the podcast that I'd like to do that. So this is a 5-part series on how to bootstrap a software business. This is part 1 today. And I don't know if we're going to do each of these consecutively, each week, or if we might throw in a different topic every here and there. But we will be doing at least 5 parts on how to bootstrap a software business. So what do you say? Let's jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm pumped. So
as I mentioned, I've been running a software business for about 4 years now. Longtail Pro was created back in 2011 is when it officially launched. And I really want to share the story of Longtail Pro and how I've made it successful, and hopefully how you can do the same. Now, to give you some background, I have started a few different business ventures, including, building niche sites. I've been successful launching Kindle books and talked about that quite a bit. I've flipped websites and, made a nice profit there. And recently I've started selling physical products on Amazon, which is, of course, the subject of the last couple of podcasts that we've done. I did about $6,000 in revenue in the first 40 days. However, when I look back at all of those businesses, none of them really compare in as far as success with Longtail Pro. Longtail Pro has been by far the most successful business that I've ever launched. And so I want to dive deep into how I made that happen and a lot of the steps and lessons that I've learned along the way. So
I think there's a little bit of perspective also that I think some of the readers haven't quite seen yet. And that's, like when we're talking to readers of Niche Pursuits, almost all the questions are about niche sites.
Right.
Even when we're like talking about other stuff that we're doing, like Amazon FBA, most of the questions are about niche sites. But Spencer, as a speaker, has gone to lots of different events. You've attended a bunch. You've given some talks a bunch. And usually when we're sitting in a room of entrepreneurs, everybody wants to know about Longtail Pro and the software business. There's just a bit of a difference in scale. And I think it's sometimes a little obscured because we use the tool all the time. We talk about the tool all the time, but we don't talk about it necessarily as a business all the time. So I think it'll be really cool to kind of open a window and show people, one of the major revenue streams for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where, of course, I mentioned Longtail Pro publicly, but I've never shared publicly the full income. I don't do regular income reports. And so maybe it's flown under the radar for some of my readers. But like you said, I think it's time to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit. And in fact, I do plan on sharing some income numbers through this series of podcasts. I don't know that I'm going to share the most up-to-date, monthly sort of income, but I will give a sneak peek here in future podcasts as far as what some of the revenue is for the business. So overall today, the first topic, part one of this series, the first step into launching a successful software business, the first thing that people need to do is they need to think of an idea and make something useful and make something that is better than existing offerings that are out there. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about specifically, the point of how to decide if your idea, your software idea, is something that truly is useful and is something that actually is better than your competitors right now. That's the first thing you need to be thinking about before you start spending money, before you hire a developer and do all of these marketing activities. You need to take the time. Is this actually a good idea, something that can be useful and better and successful? So this is all about doing a little bit of market research and, just how to figure out if you've actually got a good idea. And so before I do dive into the nitty-gritty of how to do that, I think it's important to mention or talk about why software. Why is a software business such a good idea to go into? A software business really does have a lot of advantages over other businesses that are important to think about. First of all, software can have very high profit margins, especially if you're selling software online or through an instant download. The product cost of shipping one more piece of software is basically zero, right? Because it's just a download. There's no physical product attached. So, this is obviously not the case for businesses that involve physical products because it costs you money to produce and manufacture each additional unit of product. On the same note, software is essentially something that is created one time and can be sold an infinite number of times after that. You're never going to run out of inventory. So a lot of the cost is upfront in development costs. You create it once, and then if possible, you can sell it 1,000,000 times, and there's not that ongoing cost. Now, of course, the reality is that software isn't just created once. It does require constant updates. There's always going to be bug fixes and that sort of thing. So there are those small ongoing costs. However, it's still much better than holding inventory and having to ship physical inventory. Now, the final thing that I will mention is that a software business doesn't have to be started by software developers. I'm not a programmer at all. I don't know how to code anything. However, I do own a software business and it's been successful. So I want to mention to people listening that you shouldn't limit yourself into thinking that you can't create a piece of software simply because you don't know how to code. You can hire someone. So the example that I give here is, if I said to you, hey, I'm going to buy some land and I'm going to build a house on it. It's most likely that I mean that I'm simply going to hire a contractor to build that house for me. It's not a big deal and people do it all the time. In the same manner, you can go out and hire a developer to build a piece of software for you and you will own it, just like your house. The contract developer just wants to get paid for his work, not to own another house. or another software business. And a lot of people get caught up in that, and I'll talk about that more in the future. But for the most part, when hiring somebody, you don't need to worry about them stealing your idea. They get paid to build software, not to start software businesses. And so we'll dive deep into that here, later in a future podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So those are two really great reasons about benefits to a software business.
Right.
The first is that, there's no inventory and the cost is all up front. And the second is that you can do it even if you aren't a programmer. I'm wondering if we can, or if you can answer for me, kind of the why a software business instead of a niche site or Amazon FBA. And I know we all do them both, but if there's somebody out there with limited capital and they're trying to decide which business to do or kind of what they want to do into or get into, or maybe they only have time for one, what are kind of the pros and cons of a software business versus some of the other types of businesses we talk about?
Right. And of course it can depend, right? So one of the cons of a software business is that the expenses are going to be a little bit higher than, say, a niche site or a blog. So somebody that doesn't have a little bit of capital at least, and when I say a little bit, I mean it could be as little as a few $1,000s, right? You potentially could get a software business up and running for $5,000. Now that's a big chunk of change for a lot of people. And so if you don't have that kind of money, you may have to go on and build a niche site or something like that. So a con is definitely the upfront cost for a lot of people. Now, having said that, with businesses in general, I see a lot of people go out and they start a restaurant and they don't have money, but they go out and they borrow tons and tons of money to start a restaurant, right? And that's a few $100,000. So it's all relative, right? So a software is less expensive than a lot of businesses, but more expensive probably than niche sites or even Amazon FBA. But the pros are definitely that you can scale much larger, faster, most likely, than a niche site or something similar. A blog or a niche site where you need to build an audience is going to take time. It's very labor intensive, and it may be a year or so, and the sort of upper limit of potential income is $1,000 or $2,000, and that's great on a niche site. You can make a couple of $1,000s, but the upside of a software business is multi six figures or potentially millions, just depending on what the software business is. So,
yeah, for sure. And I think maybe from where I'm sitting, it seems like with those rewards, there is definitely more risk. So, when we talk about niche sites, you can, if you wanted to do a niche site yourself without paying anything, you could do it. You could only invest labor if that's what you really wanted to do. And we talked a little bit about risk for Amazon FBA, and we kind of arrived at the number of like 25% of your actual investment, because usually you can get most of your inventory sold if you just reduce the price enough. Mm-hmm. And with both of those things, there's you can look at established niche sites and there's keyword research and all that good stuff. I think with a software business, you are investing a lot, and if it doesn't work, you lose all of that money.
Yep.
Similar to a restaurant or whatever. And also, it seems to me that the market research is quite a bit more in depth than just a niche site or Amazon FBA, where you can just kind of go on Google or go on Amazon and see what people are having success with and try to replicate it and maybe get a few more links or write some better content or something. In my view, what you're paying for that multi-million-dollar potential up front is the risk.
Absolutely. There is more risk, but of course that is why there's greater reward, potentially at the end of the rainbow, if you will. So, and that's what I want to talk about, is why it's so important that you stop and think for a little while before you run out the door and with the first idea that pops into your head say, hey, I'm going to make this a software idea. Just stop and think. Don't hire anybody. Do some research first. And so that's what I want to cover right now, is how you can decide if you're making something useful and better. So this really is the most important aspect of getting started, is to find a way that you can bring the world something that is useful or better than the existing competition.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that when we've been brainstorming additional software ideas for our business, this is the step in the process where we stop most frequently. Like we've had many dozens of software ideas, and even, 5 or 6 that we've gotten really excited about. And then after doing a little bit more research or thinking a little bit longer, often that's where we stop. We go, it's not worth it because it's not good enough, or there's not enough people out there, or the market doesn't seem right. So I think this really is an important step. So how do we do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I'm actually surprised at how many software projects people start that really aren't any better than what is already out there. And that's a big mistake. If you take the time to research what is out there, even if it's just simply using Google and researching your existing competition, you may find out that, hey, your idea is already there and that what you have isn't any better. So hopefully, as we discuss this throughout the podcast today, I can convey, sort of three points or 3 ideas that can help ensure that you have a useful idea that has potential in the marketplace. So here are 3 ways to validate your software idea. Number 1, solve your own problem. Number 2, be different from your competition. And number 3, are your competitors actually making money? And so first, solve your own problem. This isn't the only way to come up with new software ideas, but it's what I did for Longtail Pro, and it's what has worked very well for me, and as you'll see, has worked very well for others. So I think it's a very solid way, a great way to brainstorm software ideas. So the idea for Longtail Pro came to me because I was trying to solve my own problem. Back in 2008, 2009, I was very actively building small niche sites. And as a result, I was doing a lot of keyword research. The keyword research tools that I was using, Market Samurai and the Google keyword tool, had some limitations when it came to doing lots of keyword research quickly. I was spending hours and hours performing repetitive tasks with the software, and honestly, I was very frustrated. The tools that existed were slow, and they really felt like they were built by people unfamiliar with keyword research, like some software guy that decided just to create a keyword tool without really understanding how people do keyword research. So I had a problem. I was wasting hours doing keyword research tools that didn't work well in my workflow. So I identified, hey, I have a problem. So then, after doing lots of research, I was still unhappy with the other solutions that were on the market. I felt like it was time for someone that actually did tons of keyword research to create a better keyword tool. So I wanted to solve my own problem.
Now, can I jump in here? Do you think that'll give you a higher chance of success if you are solving your own problem? And I say that because I feel like maybe a lot of unsuccessful software businesses that people launch flounder because they may not know the problem well enough, and so the software is not solving that problem well enough. But if you were in the thick of it and you were actually doing the work and you have this problem that someone needs to solve, do you think you have a better chance of success if you are doing that for yourself first because you know it so well?
I think so. I think that people, like you said, that are in the thick of it, that are doing some activity or know the problem intimately well, they have a better chance at coming up with a great solution. So I do think that by solving your own problem, you certainly understand the market better. Whereas, and it's not to say that you can't do this, but let's just say that I decided I wanted to try and solve a problem that stay-at-home moms are having, some software solution, right? But it's not something that I'm encountering. I don't truly understand, even through a lot of research, and you can certainly go through the process of interviewing, and I think you should. At the end of the day, if it's your own problem, you usually will understand it better. So, like I said, you can go about brainstorming ideas lots of different ways. But the way that you're going to understand it best is if you're actually having the problem yourself. So I do think that that helps your chance of success, just because you understand the issue and you can provide a better solution.
Yeah, and I suppose it makes sense. I'm not going to have as much success creating a pizza software as a guy who's been in the pizza business for 50 years or something.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
So, and like I said, of course, there's ways that you can get in the head of your potential market, and you can research and potentially create great pieces of software, even though it's not your own problem. It's just, this is a great way for people that are starting, that are looking to bootstrap. It's worked very, very well for me. So I'm sure that people have seen other businesses that were also started by people solving their own problems. A couple of my favorites from Shark Tank are the DropStop and Cord Buddy. DropStop was created by solving a problem that one of the founders, his name is Mark Newberger, had experienced many times. This is actually in his own words. I'm just going to read this. He says, since the era of the modern automobile, we as drivers have put up with the unbelievable hassle of dropping items down the crack of the car seat. I personally can count hundreds of times and many near accidents. But in the waning months of 2006, I almost met my maker. While driving along the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, California, I was awaiting a very important phone call. I had placed my phone on the center console to easily reach the call when it came. It rang. The phone vibrated and then fell right down the gap. While frantically trying in vain to jam my hand down and reach for the phone, I took my eyes off the road, pulled the wheel to the right as I leaned to retrieve the phone, jumped the curve, slammed the brakes, nearly struck a pedestrian, and came within 2 inches of smashing into a metal pole. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Why doesn't someone come up with a way to block that stupid crack?"
That's a problem.
That is a problem. After collecting myself and being thankful no one was hurt, I paused and thought, yes, why doesn't someone make something? I don't think I've ever seen anything to block that problem in my entire life. So the DropStop was shortly invented after that and is now sold millions and is one of the 9 most successful businesses to come out of Shark Tank. So
yeah. There's another good example from Shark Tank. It's Johnny George, I think his name was, but he was the guy who he was a farmer and he was just wasting tons of water a year on like sprinkler systems, and so he developed this plastic teepee that fit over the plants and trapped all the water, so you could use like 10% more water. And it's just another example of like somebody solving their own problem with a really specific product that a lot of people wouldn't think of because they're just not as close to that problem.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And another one that I'll just mention briefly is the Cord Buddy. It was also on Shark Tank. This is just from somebody, his name's Travis Perry, the founder, but he was trying to teach his daughter how to play guitar, but her fingers were small and she was having difficulty. And so he developed a system. It's essentially a plastic clip-on you slide over your guitar if you haven't seen it, and you just push buttons. A lot like playing a video game. And by pushing those buttons, you actually start to make music, and it encourages people that are beginners and helps them learn the correct finger positions. And well, Cord Buddy has now gone on to do very, very well. Again, solving his own problem. He was trying to teach his daughter how to play the guitar, and now lots of other people are enjoying that solution. So there's lots of examples like this. And so it is the method that I recommend, at least for people starting. Try to solve your own problem. All right. So now the second step, you need to be different from your competition. So even if you solve your own problem, if there's already solutions out there, maybe you don't have a good idea. So you find that great idea, and then you start looking at your competitors. So, for example, with Longtail Pro, I was particularly frustrated with the length of time it took to search for lots of keywords on existing tools. As a result, one of my primary ideas was to simply allow users to insert multiple seed keywords at once. It's a very simple feature, but it was different from my competitors. So, for example, Market Samurai, which is a well-known keyword tool, back in 2010 when I was researching this, they only allowed users to input one seed keyword at a time. And in fact, it still only allows one keyword at a time if I'm not mistaken. So you input your seed keyword, you run that, and after you do all your analysis, if you want to look at another keyword, you have to start back at the beginning. And for the way that I was doing keyword research, it was very frustrating. And so when I compared directly to my competitors, I knew that I had something different. As simple as that was, just inputting multiple seed keywords at once, Longtail Pro would give users the ability to really streamline the way that they were doing keyword research. Now, of course, I added a couple of other features as well to make the software slightly better than competitors. But that really was one of the main differentiators, was that multiple seed keyword at once. I even went on to do a video to show, how fast Longtail Pro was. And when I compare it directly now to competitors, I have something that I can say, hey, look, this is 8 times faster than competing products. So when you look at your idea that you have, does your software idea stand out from your competitors in any way? It needs to be either faster, easier to use, cheaper, work better, or address a pain point of users that isn't fully being addressed by competitors.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think maybe that's another good way of coming up with ideas, perhaps. Like you're using a tool and you say, man, I wish it did this. And you look for a couple other people who are doing the same thing to see if they have that feature. And if they don't, then that might be an opportunity. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a great way. So using, look at the existing tools that you use and see how you can make it a little bit better or different. And, absolutely, that's a great way. I talked about in a previous podcast about being the one, about being unique. And I believe that I brought up this Longtail Pro example in that podcast. But it is so important. It makes your life so much easier if you have something different, a unique offering. If you're out there just trying to sell another tool that does the same thing that 2 or 3 or 10 other software tools are already doing, it's going to be extremely difficult to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, for sure. And I think our friends at Thrive are a really good example of this. There have been a whole bunch of quote-unquote front-end WordPress editors out there, but I think everybody at Thrive created Thrive because they were frustrated that there were no true drag-and-drop front-end editors, and that's what they built, and that was a problem that they solved. You can create a Facebook page, or not a Facebook page, but a blog post, and you can see how it looks right there without having to drag columns around and that sort of thing. So, there are tons and tons of examples out there, and I'm sure if you read the background of lots of different software, it started that way. Just there was a problem or a pain point that wasn't being fully addressed by the competition.
Yep, absolutely. And so those are the first couple of steps that people should be looking at when they're brainstorming ideas. The third step is determining if your competitors are actually making money. So let's say you've solved your own problem and you've even figured out how to make a software product that's different from your competitors. You need to basically decide if there's a market there. Is anyone actually interested in buying a product like yours? So the first 2 steps are definitely not enough. So the easiest way to find out if there's a market for your product is to find out if your competitors are making any money. So if people are interested in your direct competitors, then they will likely also be interested in yours. Now, of course, you need to convince them that they should buy your product first, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in a future podcast, the marketing aspect. But in some instances, finding out if your competitors are making money can be relatively easy. For example, when I was considering whether or not I should create Longtail Pro, I knew that one of the top keyword tools out there was Market Samurai. I got on their email list, and of course I owned their product as well to test it out and see what I could do different. Now, it just so happens that the founder of Market Samurai told me how much the business was making. I didn't ask him. He just publicly revealed it to everyone on his email list. In fact, he did it on a couple of different occasions. So now remember that these emails are way back from 2009 and 2010. So I had to do quite a bit of digging to find them. But here's a snippet from one of them. It says, "Hi, Spencer. Firstly, thank you once again for playing with Domain Samurai." That's just a different version of Market Samurai. But it says, "The demand has been mind-blowing. Well over 18,000 people are now using the software, and it's barely been out a week." So he's telling me directly that there's huge demand here. 18,000 people in 1 week. That's a lot of people using your software. So that's the first sort of like, aha, there's a market here. Now, the second email is really when he told me how well the business was doing. He says, "I finally got a product finished and out to market. That product was Market Samurai, which has now made over $6.7 million. So that's a lot of money. And I did the math. You know, the company had started, I think it was about 2 years before he sent out this email, maybe even 3. But even so, it had essentially been doing $2 to $3 million per year in sales. So I knew that there was at least a $2 to $3 million marketplace that I could potentially tap into. There's that many people out there researching keywords that are buying these types of tools. I definitely knew that my competition was making money. And as a result of that, the decision was pretty clear to me. I should definitely create Longtail Pro. It met the 3 criteria. It solved my own problem. It was unique, and I had a way of making it different. And finally, I knew for sure that existing tools were making good money. And so now it may not be as easy for other people to find out how much money their existing competition is making, but there are a lot of things that you can do. A lot of, getting on email lists or reading, blog posts of companies that either tell you any type of market data, whether that's the size of their email list, the size of their subscribers, any sort of monthly revenue numbers. There's just a lot of different ways that you can go about, whether that's download numbers. People can usually get some idea of how successful one business is or another. So,
yeah, and I actually have a tiny trick. I don't know if you remember this, but we learned it at the Traffic and Conversion Summit for how to kind of estimate how much money a software business or any type of funnel business is making. And that is and you need to take your credit card out and buy the stuff. But if you think about it as paying $97 or whatever for really good market research, it's usually a pretty good call. Basically, you pay for whatever it is, you get the URL of the thank you page, and then you plug that into compete.com, and you can see how much traffic that thank you page is getting, which is essentially the number of people who have bought the product over that time period. So it's not going to be exact. Sometimes the reporting is off, like any traffic reporting, but it's typically a very close estimate or a pretty easy way, at least, to see how much money roughly any business is making.
Yeah, awesome. No, great tip. Thanks for sharing. That's a really good idea. And then, of course, there's other general research tools. Compete can tell you, of course, and SimilarWeb, I believe, also can tell you general traffic stats that just the website itself is making. And SEMrush, of course, can do the same thing, can give you a general idea of how much traffic is going to the site and where the traffic is coming from. So that can help you start to figure out, how large is this site, how large is this business. So great tips there. Overall, that's the 3 main points that I wanted to share, but I really do want to emphasize that seeing your competitors making lots of money is a really good thing, because that means you have a healthy market of buyers, and it's better than not knowing if there's a good market in the first place. So if you see a great marketplace, if your competitor is doing really, really well, that is definitely a good sign. So this podcast is, of course, just the beginning. It's the first step, but hopefully these few tips that we've shared can get you brainstorming and doing a little bit of research to see, A, are you doing something different? And B, is there any money to be made in this particular market? But as simple as these few steps sound, I will just say they are so critical, and unfortunately a lot of people don't really go through this. I can actually share a couple of examples of software businesses that were in the middle of production. They had already hired software developers, and they've asked me to kind of look at things, and I do a 5-minute Google search and say, your exact product already exists. Right. They never took the time to see what was out there and to see if they were actually any different. So these steps are simple, but very, very critical to your success.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning here that it's okay to have a lot of stuff the same as your competitors.
Absolutely.
I think both of our favorite books, Lean Startup, talks about, just copying successful businesses, but having something that is different. Like some feature, some price difference, some sort of speed difference, whatever it is. You can copy a lot of successful businesses. You may even be able to copy 90% of a successful business, but you've got to have something that makes you different in some way. And usually it's better if it's some sort of really strong pain point. And for me, with Longtail Pro, it wasn't even the multiple seed keywords. It was the competitiveness metric.
Right.
Which did it for me, which is a very small thing. And, it's maybe an algorithm or a line of code. I really don't know, but it seems pretty small. And I was brand new to keyword research, and I wanted something simple to tell me if a keyword was tough or easy. And so, that's not a major percentage of the software that's different from its competitors, but it's one small difference that put me over the edge and, got me to buy Longtail Pro instead of Market Samurai. And I really was trying to choose between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, great firsthand example of how a buying decision is made. You you look at everything and go, well, what's different? What makes this one better than this one? And for you, it was the keyword competitiveness. And I will just say that the keyword competitiveness feature didn't even exist for the first 2 years of the business, right? That was just something that I'm constantly trying to improve the software and make the business better. That was something that we added a couple of years in. And so, initially it was a few other very simple things, but since we've tried to differentiate ourselves a little bit more and just improve on that. But yeah, absolutely great example. So there you have it. That covers part 1 of this series of how to bootstrap a software business. In part 2, we're going to be talking about how to actually develop the software, and more specifically, how to hire somebody great, which doesn't necessarily mean cheap. So we're going to dive into that, how to find a great software developer, somebody that can build you that software that is going to be successful. And like I said, unfortunately, that doesn't usually mean the cheapest person. So just be prepared for that. So that will be coming up next. As we've done with this first podcast, I'm going to be weaving in the story of Longtail Pro and giving you very specific examples. Like for the next one, how I learned that hiring cheap wasn't the best idea, and how I found a great developer that I still use to this day, even 4 years later.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe we should talk about Vilo too at some point, because I think we did a lot of stuff right, but we definitely made some mistakes with that one. So yeah, especially with like market research and pricing and stuff. So I think maybe having the contrast there would be good. But I guess for all the readers, I'd love to hear any software ideas you have. No one's going to steal it. No one's going to go make it. It costs like $20,000. So
right.
Don't be afraid. But if you have any software ideas, I would really love to hear them. Or if you have any stories of software businesses that are really cool that we don't know about, let us know, because we would love to talk about them on the podcast and use them as examples and maybe learn a little bit ourselves. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. We love to hear feedback, and people can leave feedback either in iTunes directly. We always appreciate ratings and reviews there, so don't be afraid to stop by. I believe the URL is nichepursuits.com/iTunes if you want to do that. Or they could just jump over to nichepursuits.com and find a related blog post and leave a comment. And I'm always pretty good about responding to comments and often read those in during the podcast. Or they can use my contact form just up in the header of nichepursuits.com. You click contact, and that'll shoot me an email directly, and we can communicate that way. So overall, just parting words is that, software can be an amazing business. It's definitely allowed me to do a lot of things in my business that I couldn't have done otherwise. And so I'll be sharing, of course, the success that I've had with Longtail Pro here in future podcasts, but it has been very successful. The ability to scale a software business is tremendous, and so it has a lot of upside potential. I think it's a great way, and people truly can bootstrap these businesses. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in startup costs. It really is on the lower end of the spectrum as far as businesses in general are concerned. So I hope that some people out there listening enjoy the tips that I've given. Of course, leave any feedback that you have. We'd love to hear from you. But as far as that's concerned, just thanks for listening and best of luck in your business.
Thank you.